Empty hearts and neon lights. They're playing with my mind.
Well, hello guys and welcome to what was going to be a video 34 and is now video 37 for one reason or another. I'm Alex and I'm joined today by David on a rather unsuccessful night of recording with the pair of us, but hey, you know, baby problems. I also realized I gotta talk louder. I listened to like other recordings of myself and I'm just talking just baby quiet, so I need to record louder. I need to talk louder at least. So yeah.
Well, how difficult is it to hear you?
It's not that difficult to hear me. It's just if I don't speak clearly, the microphone doesn't always pick up everything I say.
Because every time I listen to your video, you sound fine. I haven't had any issues with your audio.
Oh, okay, nice. I guess maybe it's just me thinking that then.
Well, it's easy to psych yourself out like you
Yeah,
talked about earlier.
I think it is. Well, today we're going to talk about one man in particular. I think we've established at this point. And his name,
great man.
a great man, a very powerful man. And we're going to do a little series on employees and workplace and employees in general, maybe even some politics of employee health and employee welfare and maybe even money. But we're starting off with a couple of bad employees, and we've jointly nominated the worst employee we ever knew. Well, I don't know actually. I don't know.
He's up there.
He is
definitely
up
up
there.
there.
But I have met some utterly awful reprobates in my time, I must say.
There are
And
a lot of
for those who
reprobates,
don't know who this guy is, his name is Andrew Dickstein, and he puts
the legend himself.
He puts the Andrew. Anyway.
In
So,
Dickstein, yes, very good.
Yes, I was hoping you'd finish that for me, but we'll get there. Well, you worked with him really closely to begin with. You were one of his friends, weren't you?
We were best of friends at the beginning, actually.
Yeah, he was making eyes at you for a long time.
Yeah, he liked to make this particular head-nodding gesture, and I took it as a sign of attraction. It was kind of a very interesting start to our relationship.
Mm-hmm. So he joined Venerus Delta, where you worked and I worked, under the auspicious almightiness of Rupert and Jeremy. I'd like to say we worked
yes,
under
all
them.
hail the redheads.
All hail the English redheads. What was it like coming to work with, as you put it yourself very politely, two English redheads and one chubby redhead and one chubby Englishman and one skinny-ass Englishman, and then one shrimp?
I have to say, it was one of the most unsettling experiences of my life.
Even more worse than being hazed for the football team?
Well, I actually quite enjoyed the hazing, but that's a subject for another day. No,
I'll write that down.
Walking into this, yeah, I bet you will. Walking into that scuzzy warehouse, which was populated by a bunch of rather interesting-looking foreigners with weird accents, was very unsettling. And so, of course, naturally, I took right away to the only American in there, which, you know, is of another ancestry, but, you know, he seemed American enough. And the first person I talked to was actually Rupert when I walked in the building. You guys were just opening up the bay doors for the day. It was about to be another hot Michigan summer day. And Rupert just put me to work right away on one of the benches. And that was the rest is history.
Yeah. What do you first remember about old Andrew? It sucks that I share a middle name with the fella. It just, thankfully, his last name makes up for it.
It is a wonderful last name. But, well, you know, the first couple of days, I had quite a bit of trepidation about the work crew. I wasn't sure what to think. Nobody was really talking too much. Andrew, on one of the first few days, had almost immediately begun to try and get me to notice Rupert's tendency to sit at the desk and work on the computer. And he would do this through a rather strange maneuver where he would kind of whisper at me like, hey, or yo, or, you know, whatever he would use to get my attention. And then he would start nodding in Rupert's direction. And then he would, you know, start laughing and like, can you see that? Do you see this? Can you believe this? You know, as if Rupert was just being completely and utterly lazy. I mean, of course, he probably was, but that's besides the point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where he'd worked before where the idea of checking up on your boss and making sure he's working was a thing.
Well, that's what was most bizarre to me is if things are getting done, it's none of my business what my boss is doing.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you're getting paid, it's none of your business what your boss is doing, really.
Well,
Honestly.
that's the other thing. I didn't care. I was making. I mean, I guess it was $10 an hour, but hey, it was money.
Oh, really? He paid me a lot more.
Oh, I bet he did for all those days he didn't show up. Of course, that's just nepotism.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you appreciate the good American tradition of nepotism. It is a time-honored tradition and one that you can find around the globe.
We love it here too.
Oh, I know. So,
But
yeah. So, I mean, how did it all start and unfolding? I think it started with his irritation at Rupert, and then Rupert found little things to pick on him with too, like his vaping.
Yeah, it wasn't really a little thing. The vaping was kind of an issue, and he was a real jackass about it, to be frank. As you know, so I can't remember exactly how many days in it was, and I think it was still the first week though. And I was sitting across the table from Jeremy. You guys were busy eating your classic disgusting cereal. And
That's
Jeremy
great.
and I were talking. Yeah, it's so gross. But Jeremy and I were sitting, and Andrew thought it'd be a good idea to join us. So he sat down next to Jeremy, looked me dead in the eye, took a long drag on his vape pen, and then blew the smoke in my face. Then he kind of chuckled, and at the same time, Jeremy kind of squinted her eyes, looked at him, looked at each other in disbelief, and then just kind of ignored him. It was just the most bizarre thing ever, and he just finally got the hint, got up, and went away. But it was very strange, and I still don't understand what he was trying to do to this day.
He must have been like these weird foreigners. There's this big American footballer here. He's the size of a shrimp. They're all eating cereal. I mean, it is so weird. You're there eating like 6 tons of meat, 7 peanut butter sandwiches. You know, you at that time still thought you might have a career playing with other men. Sorry, that came came out wrong, but no, it didn't.
Well, yes, it did. But I'm almost, considering the context of the rest of his actions, I'm almost positive that he saw himself as the brains of the operations, and I was most certainly his brawn, his brute to do his bidding.
Yeah, I think he sort of felt that you guys would have an affinity together. When did you guys stop?
He must have.
Go ahead.
Well, either that or he thought I was such a simpleton that he could come blow some smoke in my face and then assume dominance over me.
Yeah, you don't like smoke being blown in your face and a look of dominance. I'm really surprised.
Not when the guy weighs about 90 pounds and I can curl him with one arm. No.
Oh dear, what a disaster.
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was a very strange experience. But after that, Rupert had explicitly told Andrew not to vape any longer. And I can't remember exactly when this occurred, but in the topic of vaping, Andrew decided to go hide in the back of the warehouse behind that little trail of boxes in a little corner where nobody would find him, where he took a couple puffs. Then he came out, was looking at me with a big grin on his face, and he just said, "Still vaping, brah," with a little defiant chuckle, as if he was being a badass for smoking in the back of the warehouse.
What a legend!
Unbelievable.
What a legend! When you truly feel like you're a powerful man because you can vape.
I think it was in that moment he knew he was the real power.
Yeah. He had some. So let's move more towards the whole firing incident. I mean, he'd been turning up to work. What were some of his excuses for showing late to work?
You need to fill in your audience on the first one about the Escalopagus.
Yeah. I think he started randomly being late. It all started, I think he was sort of testing the waters with Rupert a bit. I think it did start, and the first one is very memorable because he managed to mistype about half of his text. I mean,
yes.
Instead of saying he had a bruised, what was it meant to be? A bruised esophagus?
A braised, I don't know what he meant. I've assumed a braised or bruised, but braised, which I think he thought was incredibly intelligent. judging by his misuse of other vocabulary.
Yeah,
later
he
on.
managed. He actually, if I'm not mistaken, he spelled esophagus as sarcophagus, which is an Egyptian tomb. I mean, Egyptian coffin. I'm pretty sure.
Well, perhaps he just imagined himself getting smoked out in the sarcophagus.
Yes, that sounds like very plausible to me. Yeah, that gave us a lot. And he said blood was coming out from his throat. Yeah, he must have had some digestive issues. You have to wonder what sort of things he was. Anyway.
Well, just look at his last name for the answer to that.
Okay, yep, Stein, beer, I guess.
Well, yes. Let's keep it PG.
Yeah,
so,
we'll try.
So I was filled in on that one. So what really began our friendship was the day that he decided to not show up because his cat was supposedly missing. And he was out in the backyard apparently laying traps for his
That's
cat.
right. I keep forgetting this. Wow. That's right. He did. He laid traps.
But that was key. That was the linchpin to our early friendship because he was missing that day. And, we were all working kind of quietly. And then finally someone broke the silence. I can't remember if it was me or Joe or somebody. And someone just asked, "Hey, do you even like Andrew?" And the answer was, of course, no. And then from then on bloomed quite the friendship.
Yeah, wow. It's funny how that's all it took. That's right. Unbelievable. And then his excuses started getting more and more bizarre. His dad was sick, his cat was sick, his car wouldn't start. He couldn't. His truck.
Well, his dad one was a good one. He was sitting in the corner, falling behind as always, and Rupert told him to get off his phone. And while sitting in the chair, looking demure as ever, he kind of meekly looked up at Rupert and said, "I'm texting my sick dad." I just couldn't believe the insolence.
Yeah. I couldn't either. I know Jeremy would rile him up during the break time with conversations about how capitalism was the answer to everything and socialism and burn. I remember these things. I think, Jeremy would sort of go off on a subject that he just knew Andrew did not like, Dickstein didn't like, and he would just rile him up. But of course, he wouldn't really say anything. He'd just sit there. You could see him listening, but breathing on his vape very... you could see the steep...
being the clever little bugger he was, or he thought he was at least, he was at least smart enough to not try and chime in.
Yeah, he was. And then,
so there was that, and another favorite was when we were loading the truck, and it was Rupert. So the way we did it was we laid those plyboards on some straps and beams that were laying across the truck. And it was kind of dangerous being up there when we were loading up those stacks of 5 chairs. Mm-hmm. And Rupert needed a break because his back was hurting. So he came down, and it was Andrew's turn to go up. And Rupert explicitly had told Andrew where not to step. And if he did, and because there was space, that he would fall through and hurt himself. Well, what did Andrew do? But put his foot exactly where Rupert had told him not to. And he promptly fell right through the board. And he collapsed in this moment that'll live in infamy. And everybody in the room kind of paused. And all of us in the truck were looking at him, watching, waiting for him to see what he was going to do. And he sat there clutching his knee, curled up in the fetal position. And he kind of peeked over his shoulder at everybody to see what our reaction was. And we were all just staring intently at him. And so he kind of slowly rose up to the ground. But everybody in that room knew he was considering trying to go home for the day. It was just brilliant.
Oh, dear. He didn't have very big legs. I remember that. I remember they were skinnier than Joseph's, and that was saying something, because Joseph was a real skinny guy.
He wasn't the big, strong alpha male he is now.
No, absolutely not. Things kept escalating
were you
a
there
bit.
For the weighing contest?
For the what contest?
The weighing contest.
I was. I think I was. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Where he was really upset that Joseph actually weighed more than him, right?
Yes, this was our first glimpse into his resentment that he wasn't actually better than anybody else there. I think he was kind of holding on to this little sliver that he might at least be bigger than one person there.
Yeah. Poor man. Getting outweighed by Joseph when Joseph first moved here is pretty low.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because Joe already had the height, Joe's an acceptable height, and Andrew was what, like 5'8", maybe 5'9".
Yeah.
Just sad, really.
Yeah, so he must have been plotting something with you. I mean, but by himself. I think he initially thought he'd get you on his side, but it became fairly obvious, I think, to everyone that you weren't about his business.
Well, I was kind of working like a double agent. I think everybody, because I had told you that I suspected he was trying to usurp Rupert's authority,
Hmm.
and perhaps Jeremy's as well. I know he didn't like Jeremy either, but Rupert was his target, and so he would always just try and say things to turn me against Rupert and to poison the well, so to speak.
Hmm.
And and then so it kind of developed where I was reporting some information to you guys, and we were having a bit of fun with it, feeding him. I remember one day Joe and I devised a plan where we were going to really try and drive the resentment between, you know, and really get him to hate Rupert. And so we started feeding him information about Rupert just not working and being on Reddit and being lazy and and it kind of, I think it helped push along his desire to catch Rupert in his fraud or embezzlement scheme.
Yeah, so that was his plan. At least we didn't know about this plan till after he got fired. How the day he got fired, I guess I didn't know anything was going on till like right then. How did it all start? It started with
Neither did I.
Rupert repeatedly was asking him to just get off his phone and start rapping and keep going and work faster. Not in a mean way.
I can't remember precisely. Right. I think what it was is some insubordination. I can't remember exactly what triggered Rupert, but I remember him just saying, "All right, you're fired." And again, maybe we're attributing, anachronistically these attributes to Rupert's eyes, but I swear there was a switch. And he just immediately, after telling him he was fired and to leave, he marched over to the punch-out machine and punched Andrew out and then said, "Get out of here." It was incredible.
Yeah. One of the most amazing moments of Rupert's life, I think.
I mean, he was dripping with toxic masculinity.
Oh, he was. I think that's right. You know, you're a great finger on it. Really, it was pure toxic masculinity. And
I mean, there was just this primal instinct to just to beat Andrew down and make him know who was boss.
I don't blame him. I would have wanted to do the same thing.
Truly, truly. So,
so
after that transpired,
yep.
from mine and Joe's perspective, Andrew couldn't believe that he had been banished by Rupert, and so he immediately marched over to Lonnie by the bay door. And
For those who don't know,
he can't fire me. He doesn't have the power to do that.
Yeah, I'll briefly explain who Lonnie is.
Take it from here.
For those who don't know, Lonnie is like your sort of typical guy you see in the movies, who's just the genuine, works really hard, general dog's body, jack of all trades, master of none. He handled shipping and receiving, and he really didn't do much. Like, he wasn't the world's fastest worker, but what he did well, and he did it hard. He worked hard.
He looked the part, right?
He looked
so missing
the part.
Teeth, it's kind of ragged.
He almost like Mr. Miyagi character.
Yeah, but a good hearty man. I respected him.
Oh, me too. I liked him a lot.
He was a worker.
He was.
Yeah.
And he went up to Lonnie and he just asked, "Rupert just fired me. Rupert can't fire me." And I remember just Lonnie sort of chuckling to himself as if, this guy just doesn't know what's going on. Rupert fired you, huh? Oh, well, you should probably go then, and the look on his eyes. That's when he first began to question himself. You sort of, you make a rash decision, you're like, oh, hang on a second. Like, did I completely miscall this play? I don't think he still thought he had yet, but I think he was open to the possibility that he might have at that point. The fear.
He was suffering. Yes, his greatest laid plans were falling about him. I think it was then that his cognitive dissonance was triggered, right? He revealed that he didn't actually understand how a hierarchy works in a blue-collar workplace like a warehouse, right? It's a low-skill, low-wage job where a bunch of dudes are just there working hard all day, and they don't really care about what other people are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he also revealed that he believed that Rupert had usurped the power and hadn't been given it by Jim and Bill.
Yeah. So he goes from there. He goes upstairs to the masters of the company. That sort of, is the sort of old-fashioned word master, but you know what I mean. The sort of the old timers. He went upstairs to them, and I think he started accusing Rupert of having embezzled funds from the company, which, on the face of it, is a ridiculous accusation because you make the sorts of accusations usually deal with serious money, and the point upon which he was claiming this accusation was Rupert having punched me into work an hour earlier than I showed up. That's reason for that was because I was going to Meyer to pick up some milk and tea bags for the kitchen and a few other groceries. Poor man.
Yeah, what a poor. Well, first of all, quick correction. It wasn't Bill. It was Jim Meyer. It just the name finally came back to me.
That's right.
But yes, it was. What was hilarious is, as I alluded to earlier, his misuse of vocabulary. He was using embezzlement instead of, as you had correctly pointed out earlier, fraud. And even then, it's hardly fraud. It doesn't really even fit within the definition. I mean, very loosely.
Yeah.
So I think he latched onto a big word and he wanted to use it.
Yeah, it was a big word for him. I'm not sure he could spell it at that point, but we hope in his future when he commits embezzlement himself, maybe he'll be taught what it really means. I think he did not expect. But did they? No, I'm pretty sure they just told him to get off the premises. He went up to a meeting. I know he went up to a boardroom meeting with Rupert and Jeremy, and the two Jims. And they pretty much just said, well, if Rupert fires you, you have to go. Like, we're sorry, but you have to go. Like, Rupert's in charge down there. And
yes, I know that Jeremy regaled us with tales of him goading Andrew, which, the truth of which, but...
Yeah, doesn't sound like Jeremy at all.
No, not at all. He would never do that.
No, absolutely.
But, so anyway, so Andrew left, finally. I mean, he wasn't going to do anything else. He knew he wasn't a big man. And he proceeded to engage in a war of words with Rupert via text.
That's right. That's when the text messages started coming, comparing Rupert to his old...
and what a gift they were.
Yeah, Rupert still has them. Someday I'll need to look at them again and maybe get my own copies.
We should print them out and frame them.
If he ever amounts anything in his own life, those are pretty funny. I'd hate for him to become a local politician someday, and we'd have some real.
Oh. Yeah, that might table him. Well, the best one. I suppose my favorite of the bunch, although all of them are my favorite, was the Mexican manager story that he told Rupert. Do you remember that one?
I don't. Do you want to tell me?
Well, yes, as best as I can remember it, he was trying to demean Rupert's managing abilities. And so he was trying to tell Rupert about this Mexican manager that he worked for at a Mexican restaurant, and how this Mexican, who apparently was wearing a suit at work, would get behind the counter and loosen his tie and take off his jacket. And then he would just work hard with all the other employees, unlike Rupert, who sat on Reddit all day. And of course, us being us, we added some tidbits here and there about maybe a belt was loosened and maybe he was a little closer to Andrew than he let on. And so it kind of became its own thing, a legend. But the original texts are still hilarious.
Yeah. He really... I mean, if someone fired you, usually you would just sort of take the L, get out of there, and never contact them again. It's surprising to me to see that someone would just continue to engage with someone.
His pride was clearly crushed. I mean, the final coup de grace was when he was driving past Stelter like 2 weeks after Rupert fired him. And he sent Rupert a picture of him flipping the building off and said, "F you prick." It was just beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, dear. Oh, well, I wonder where he's doing in life. I wish we could have sort of a, hey, this week find out what so-and-so is doing with their life,
Maybe we can make that a monthly topic.
Yeah.
We're catching up with the Dicksteins. But
Fridays with the Dicksteins. Wow.
It's always a party. So anyways, he was quite the character, but he's definitely indicative of a larger problem with the millennial and Zoomer work culture.
Yep, I would agree with that. I think
So
it's
I certainly think he exemplifies the topic that we're going to be moving into.
yeah, which is going to be employees, the health and wealth of the employees in the healthcare and in the just general world industry. I'd love to see. So for next week, I've got a story about a guy called Marshall Hayden, who I had the. This word does not suit what I'm about to tell you, but I had the pleasure of training him for 6.5 weeks.
Oh yes.
Oh, and I must say, this man, in some ways, when it comes to his storytelling, puts Dickstein to shame.
Really, that's impressive.
No, there are so many little nooks and crannies about this extra story. I can't wait to tell you, but it's 25 minutes in already. Wow, we do seem to manage to talk the hind leg off a donkey, don't we?
That we do. But it's always a good time. It just kind of disappears.
It is. Well,
So, yes.
I'll
Well,
just
let's
end it
continue
there.
this next week.